Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith. Matt is filling in for Brian this afternoon, so he'll be with you shortly. But for the next 3 hours, it's you, it's me. Well, and Headless Bell's over there too. But, I mean, if only you could see what I see, then you would know what a disappointment it is that he's Headless Bell. We got a lot going on today. A lot going on. There's a little debate that's going to happen tomorrow that everybody's getting excited about. We got a social media opinion from the Supreme Court where the Supreme Court basically said that the folks did not have standing when the federal government and the Biden administration pressed social media companies to take down content that they deemed misinformation. That's certainly a conversation that we need to have. I've written about that extensively. And, you know, just to be blunt, I think they got it wrong. I might give them a little bit of a pass and say, well, you decided it on standing grounds and the companies wanted to do it anyway, so maybe it wasn't super coercive. Maybe we get another fact pattern where a company is in fact coerced who doesn't want to do that stuff and isn't in bed with the administration. But I can tell you, folks, that's one of the scariest things that we could be up against is when the government and the entities that feed us information are in bed together. I don't care what the Supreme Court says about whether it's permissible or not. That is something that should concern every last one of us. Like I said, we'll talk about the debate. I want to talk more about life and the in vitro fertilization resolution from the Southern Baptist. I don't want to let that one go and just say, hey, this is a pastime. You know, it happened a couple weeks ago. It's no big deal. It's just the Baptist. I think we need to have a discussion about what matters to us, whether IVF is in fact sinful and morally reprehensible on the same level as partial birth abortion. I don't think it is, but I think we should at least have that discussion. And I want to talk about a couple columns that I've written over at the Tennessean about banning smartphones in the classroom. It's something that I've talked about repeatedly on the air. I've written about. We, for bad reasons, haven't really done that. And so I want to talk about that, talk a little bit about Buc-ee's, and we got some a pronoun column over there about gender identity and whether anyone should be forced to use anyone else's pronouns.
Hey, on the cell phone front, real quick, I just want to give a shout out to my ninth grade math teacher who said I would never have a calculator at arm's length and I would need to know that stuff. So, Mrs. Olson, you were wrong. I have a calculator in my pocket right now, so bite me.
Well, I don't want any teachers to bite me. So, a couple things as we get underway. I do this every time to make sure you guys know who I am. I appreciate very much the folks over in Franklin at Thanks who let me take time to come and do fill-in radio. They help folks grow a business with gratitude. It's cool. It's a fun company. It's made me think about how I express gratitude to the people that I work with, because a lot of us, we don't do a good job of that. We just kind of move along the way, and it doesn't have to be huge, but we need to be appreciative of the folks that we work with, and Thanks helps us do just that. Over at the Tennessean and AL.com, that's where I write. I'm on the editorial board of the Tennessean. Fantastic group over there. Matt jokes that I get let out of my conservative closet periodically to come do radio. It's truly a privilege to be able to have opinions that you guys consume and interact with, and to be able to espouse the views that I think are important. As a conservative, limited government, free markets, the rule of law, I mean, these are things that we talk about, but to be able to write it and do that as a way to make money is really a lot of fun, and it's pretty awesome. And I just want to thank you guys. I'm a partner in a media company, and we made The Ballad of Davy Crockett. You can check it out now. All of you folks that talk about woke culture and say, hey, I don't like it, I don't want it, and have rented The Ballad of Davy Crockett and said, we want to put our money behind our values. Y'all don't know how much I appreciate that, because it's encouraging to me, the guys who built this project with me. It's encouraging to other independent filmmakers who have these dreams and say, hey, I want to make something that my kids actually want to watch and they get excited about. And for me, to be able to be a part of making something that my kids can watch with their buddies and just have fun with it and run around and pretend to be Davy Crockett, that's pretty cool. And we want to continue that and do more. So I want y'all to know that, because I don't think it's fair for me to put my opinion out there without telling you some context, especially since y'all hear from me pretty regularly on Matt's show on Wednesdays. But I want to be clear. I want to be transparent, because I've always hated it. My whole political career, when I say that, I worked in public policy. I worked in Congress. I worked in the House and the Senate. I ran the House Republican Policy Committee. And I always hated it when people had interest behind them and they weren't clear about it. It didn't bother me when they were honest and said, hey, these are folks that, help pay my salary. But the folks that didn't and acted like, for example, they might be talking about how vaping is less harmful than cigarettes. It is. But if it's the tobacco industry that's funding you saying that, it kind of makes you scratch your head a little bit. Again, don't mind if folks are transparent. That's what I'm trying to be. The dark times are almost over. I'm going to continue to say this for those of you who love football. It is hot. It is humid outside. We know it's coming. I think there was a Stanley Cup. It happened. That's usually how I know the dark times are almost over, is hockey ends. Hockey is the longest season on the face of the earth. I love the Predators, but when you're in the playoffs and the playoffs last a lot longer than your team does, it's kind of disheartening. So football is coming. It can rescue us. I'll be out there coaching the Nolensville Stars. There's some great programs around here. Several of you talk about your kids and the programs that they're in and that they play football. And I got to tell you something. I am so excited that so many of y'all who are listening have kids that play football, because you know what I know about those kids? They're willing to do difficult things. They're willing to get out there and sweat and do things that aren't fun to play a game that is fun. And that's a fundamental virtue that a lot of kids are lacking. So keep it up. Get out there, compete, push them to breathe some hot air, and we'll see y'all on the field. But I appreciate every last one of y'all. I can't literally shout out every single program, but I try to let you guys know how much I appreciate you putting your kids in a position to be resilient, putting your kids in a position where they got to do difficult things. You want to save America? It's not going to be most of the folks listening to the sound of my voice. It's not going to be me. It's going to be the kids. It's going to be that we raised them in a different way. We did a better job, and they were there to put us on better footing in a better direction. And so I want to applaud all of y'all that keep pushing your kids to try hard things and accomplish them, because that's going to make all the difference in the world. I also bought a truck. This is an interesting experience, because y'all have heard about the car market, and well, we got a couple years ago during COVID. I mean, we were at a point where used cars and new cars were almost the same price. And that dynamic, I can report, has changed. I had a tire. I was in Alabama. I was driving on a family vacation. The side of my tire hooked. There was a road with no shoulder. The inside got hooked, pulled me off the road, hit a rock or a stump or something, smashed that tire and the wheel, and did a bunch of damage, and ultimately totaled the car. The car was, 11 years old, because I do not like car payments. I do not like dealing with, I just don't like it. I like to know that my thing's paid off. I try to do that as quickly as possible. And anyway, I was in the process, and I started looking around. And I was over at Toyota Cool Springs, and I looked at a bunch of different dealerships, and a lot of the stories about car dealerships that you've heard, the stereotypes, are true. There were folks that I met with at other dealerships that were interesting, pushy. I mean, all the different things. And some of them didn't even act like they wanted to sell me a car, which was kind of funny too. I was driving, and I saw a truck that I really liked, and I just said, okay, how much for that truck? And started the conversation. I was test driving it, and a young guy named Ghazi. I'm pretty sure he told me he was Italian who grew up in Turkey, and he's over here. He knows like 4 or 5 languages. Really impressive guy. He's in the car. We're test driving it, and he's doing a good job. He's talking about all the features, everything like that. And then he gets to the cover in the back of the bed, and he says, well, this cover, it's so great. I didn't even really wasn't paying attention to features about the cover, but I just deadpan while we're driving said, yeah, that cover seems like it'd be great. Make it a lot easier to hide the bodies. To which he immediately was like, yeah. And then he was like, no, bodies, don't do that. So I terrified Ghazi. I have to apologize for that, because then he found himself in the car with me and my wife thinking that we're Bonnie and Clyde and he's about to get murdered and stuffed in the back of the truck. So I probably shouldn't have scared him, but those guys were fun to deal with. I actually like the negotiating part more than I care about the car. I'm not a car guy. I like the truck. It's great. I'm going to pick it up on Thursday. They're getting it all cleaned up and that sort of stuff. But the negotiation, the back and forth, can you do this? Can you do that? How about this? How about that? It's a fun process. I know some of y'all don't like it. My wife hates it. She's like, please stop. Like, just let's end the negotiation. Give them what they want, because she doesn't enjoy that experience. I do. I can report that there's a lot more play in the market. There's a lot more room for having those discussions. They have all the dealers that I went to and looked at, they had tons of cars, new cars all over the place. So some of the supply chain issues that had limited stuff seem to have waned, and no longer is it the case that, a new car and used car are exactly close together. So give it a shot. If you were holding off because you heard it was rough, go check it out. Like I said, I had a good experience. Eric, Ghazi, Yuri, the guys over there were great to work with and pretty cool dudes. And so do not be afraid of having to buy a car right now. I had to do it. You can do it too. Okay. Right off the bat, let's talk about this. We got to take a break in just a minute or two, but I want to get out the basics so we can talk about this Supreme Court case that dealt with, this is Murphy v. Missouri, and the conservative bloc is what we call it. Alito, Barrett, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Roberts, Thomas. Only half of them supported the opinion. It was a 6-3. Barrett, Kavanaugh, Roberts, Jackson, Kagan, Sotomayor were all together. Alito, Gorsuch, and Thomas were against it. But they basically said that the plaintiffs didn't have any standing against the Biden administration because they couldn't show, quote, the plaintiffs, without a concrete link between their injuries and the defendant's conduct, asked us to conduct a review of a years-long communication between dozens of federal officials across different agencies with different social media platforms about different topics, end quote. That's Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Quote, the court standing doctrine presents us from exercising general legal oversight of the other branches of government, end quote. This is a win for the Biden administration. And I think where I would distinguish this a little bit, okay, fine. If you say the social media platforms were already censoring folks, they were already saying this is what's misinformation. And let's be honest, that was skewed in the left direction. It was the left stuff we like, the right stuff we don't like as much. And so there was a lot of things swept into misinformation that weren't. And we continue to see this. This happens. You can see the difference in different platforms of what's allowed on, what people can say, what they can't say. I've long said that those platforms as private companies have the right to do that. I understand that that's not popular, but I don't like the idea that the government gets to come in and tinker with what these companies are doing, which is why when I wrote about this topic, I didn't like the idea that the government could call these folks and say, hey, we need you to take this stuff down. we don't like this. Here's a post. And they were flagging individual posts from different people that had a platform, that had an audience, that had a following. And the administration was literally saying, here's this one, here's a batch, check these, take these down. And they were doing it. So that's actually what was happening. And it all hinged on this idea that you can talk about standing, but the big thing here was coercion. That the government and federal agencies, the argument was they were coercing tech companies into silencing conservatives through takedown demands. And the lower court ruling said, yeah, they were doing exactly that. And the Supreme Court, in an opinion written by Amy Coney Barrett, said, no, the Fifth Circuit was wrong in its conclusions and that there was no substantial risk of harm from the government. So I want to get into that discussion. I'll check you guys out on the Super Talk text line, see what y'all are saying. Call in, let me know what you think, because this one's a big case, and I think it's worth a minute of our time. 615-737-9986. That's the Members Nutrition text line. Let me know what you think. We'll talk about it on the other side of the break.
Coming up at 12:30, we have more information on that Supreme Court ruling that helps the Biden administration, and a Murfreesboro group that tried to get away with an ATM. Well, things did not go as planned. That's coming up at 12:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. Cameron Smith in for Matt Murphy. We're talking about Murphy v. Missouri, which is the Supreme Court opinion just issued, which essentially, I don't know of a better word than to say punted on the facts before it. Here's a quote from the case, or the opinion written by Amy Coney Barrett. We begin and end with standing. At this stage, neither the individual nor the state plaintiffs have established standing to seek an injunction against any defendant. We therefore lack jurisdiction to reach the merits of the dispute. So it is the good news is that they didn't reach the merits here and ultimately decide that the government did coerce, didn't coerce. They're basically saying the folks here did not have appropriate standing to argue that the government was doing that. I think it's a huge missed opportunity because it was very clear what the government was doing. So let me differentiate between newspapers and tech platforms, social media platforms. We've talked about it before. Section 230 basically says you companies aren't liable for things users post on your platforms, because if they were, they would be sued out of existence. That's just true. I don't see any world where a social media platform that could exist that allowed people to post things that could stay viable without Section 230. It just would not work. A newspaper doesn't have that. So a politician can't really take a newspaper out. A social media company, they could, and they can, and they do threaten to say, well, we'll get rid of this, we'll regulate this. And so the government does have a hammer there that they can go after these companies with. And it seemed like some of the rationale in this case was, well, they wanted to do it anyway. They had been removing what they deemed misinformation for quite some time in their private companies, and they can do that if they want. I agree with that. But when the government comes in and they threaten and say, hey, if you don't do this, we'll have to see how we apply Section 230, that's coercion. And this is one of the things, this is kind of wonky and dorky, but the court on a lot of the standing issues, there are issues, there's no such thing as what's called general taxpayer standing. So just because you're a taxpayer, you're a U.S. citizen, you can't sue and say the government's doing something it shouldn't do. You have to have a case in controversy. You have to have an injury that you can point to. And that's the other thing that Justice Barrett kind of takes away from here and says, well, except for one plaintiff, they couldn't really show that how they were injured by this information being taken down. The one that could, well, by the time she filed suit, this was already kind of dealt with and over. So there was no reason to believe this was going to happen again in the future. I think it's a miss, because when the government, the message that Murphy v. Missouri sends to the federal government, and I'm not talking about just the Biden administration, I'm talking about any future administration, is that if you don't like something you see online, then you have the capacity to go ask them to take it down, remove it. And as long as you're sophisticated, and Justice Alito points this out, he says, as long as you're sophisticated enough, you can get away with it. That's what the Supreme Court's saying, is as long as you're asking and not coercing, as long as you're doing it in a rhetorical way that doesn't lend itself to a very clear open and shut case of you threatened them, then it's fine. And I think that's such a dangerous thing for, look, I love writing for the Tennessean. Fantastic outlet. I would be foolish to suggest that the Tennessean's reach is what it once was. There's so many more sources of information out there right now, and the juggernauts are TikTok, Facebook, X. Like, y'all all know who they are, because that's where a lot of us get our information from. And so to basically say if you're a sophisticated enough politician, you can coerce you can coerce without technically coercing. It feels gross. Because when information is piped to me through my phone, I want to know that that's information I know it's fed through an algorithm, right? What I don't want to happen to me is that I'm fed information through an algorithm that is curated by the government before I get it. That's what they do in North Korea. Here is your state-based news. Freedom of the press, freedom from government coercion is absolutely critical to the freedom of our republic. And so if we don't have it, we have a problem. We've got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Good afternoon. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. We've got some clouds rolling in. It's 87 degrees here at 1232. A complete forecast is coming up. In the nation's capital, the Biden administration cannot be sued for talking to social media companies about alleged COVID and election misinformation on their platforms. That's what the 6-3 Supreme Court ruling says this morning, written by Justice Amy Coney Barrett and the three conservative justices that have been dissenting. They would be Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, and Neil Gorsuch. Turning now to the Mid-State, the Murfreesboro Police Department looking for 3 people who reportedly used a stolen pickup truck and a crowbar to try and pry open an ATM. Police were sent to investigate a burglary alarm at the Ascend Federal Credit Union on West Clark Boulevard in Murfreesboro at about 2 in the morning on Sunday. When the police got there, they found the ATM damaged, but it was still in place. The police department, they released surveillance video that appears to show a man trying to pry open the ATM using a crowbar. At the same time, another guy, he's got the thing hooked up to his truck with a chain on his tow hitch. They tried to pull the ATM out of the ground, but the chain broke. Despite their efforts, police say the suspects, they didn't get any money. Police confirmed that the truck used was actually a stolen GMC Sierra in red color. If anybody's got any info, they're asked to contact the Murfreesboro Police. And again, we're so excited about tomorrow night. We will be airing the presidential debate tomorrow night on Super Talk. The debate is set to get underway at 8 o'clock right after the live radio event at Hop Springs in Murfreesboro. And we hope you'll join us for that and the debate watch party as well. That is the latest news. Weather's on the way. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt. He'll be in for Brian. Look, you guys asked more questions about my truck than anything related to the government. So I did not say what truck I bought. I bought a Ram Bighorn. Yes, I was at the Toyota dealer, but the same group that owns the Toyota dealership also owns the Dodge Chrysler over on 96. And so that's what I got. And I'm real excited about it. I'm just I had a truck in college. Okay. It was a red Chevy Silverado Z71 with a brush guard, and it was gorgeous. I loved it. I probably am married because of that truck. My wife loved that truck. And when I graduated college, I realized how much I was paying for gas. Gas prices spiked. And I said, well, I'm going to be a lawyer. I need a practical car. And so I got a sedan. And the car that I was driving before I bought this truck was a Passat SE. It has V6 in it. It's turbocharged. It was neat. It was a sedan. Sedans are all the same to me. They're neat cars. Now, there's some cars that are great cars. I understand if you're a car person, you differentiate on all of those things. I loved my truck. I've never loved a car, but my truck was great, and I knew my wife loved it. So when I was test driving this truck, the moment I knew I was going to buy it was when I looked over in the passenger seat, and my wife had a big grin on her face because we were up high in the air with a 6-inch lift and a big old truck, and she just thought that was cool. And that was good enough for me, because the last time I saw her face like that was when we were in my big red truck. So to me, that makes all the difference in the world. So yes, I got an inappropriately large truck. I don't have no idea how I'm going to park it close to the Thanks offices in downtown Franklin. Those parking garages, just so you know, have a 7-foot clearance, and this car is about 7 feet tall. So I was at Costco and I saw a truck. I don't know what the guy did to it. It was a Ford F-150, and it had to be 11 feet tall. Wildest thing I've ever seen. But yes, that is what I bought. I did not buy a Cybertruck. I've seen those things. If you're a Cybertruck person, I'm not going to speak ill of anybody else's truck, but those things look like they're about to launch into space. I mean, I'm half thinking maybe they'll tilt back up on the tailgate and just launch, because that's what they remind me of, is some kind of space thing. I don't really, I mean, I guess they are a truck, but if you want to know the truth, it kind of reminds me of an El Camino. When I look at the Cybertruck, it's like a super fancy El Camino. So anyway, the case that we were talking about, Murphy v. Missouri, a couple of y'all asked some questions that I did want to address because I think it's important. You said, well, we'll compare and contrast that standing issue with the stuff with illegal immigration, like when these folks are getting killed. What about, why can't there be standing for those families to sue the Biden administration? Well, to be real clear, there is, if you lose a family member, something like that, that is very much an injury, right? Like, your family has been harmed because of what that illegal immigrant did to your child, your spouse, or whomever. The challenge in that instance is something called proximate cause. It's very clear that individual should be charged and held accountable under the law, because they're the one that did the thing. The challenge for holding the administration responsible and having standing is to say, well, your immigration policies led to this person committing this act. You could get to your policies, and you probably can get to your policies led to this person being in the country. But to take it a step further and then say, and now we can file civil suit to compel you to change immigration law in like a civil suit, I don't think you'd win there. I just don't think the court would give you standing as a family that's lost a loved one to compel immigration policy, because if that's the case, you got a whole lot of folks, anytime something bad happens, that the court could then come in and reach into public policy making. And I know that's not like an answer that most of y'all want to hear, because it's pretty clear that the Biden administration policies on immigration have been an abject failure. But that's in the policy arena, that we don't want the courts coming in and rewriting policy because they're unelected. They're not accountable for that sort of thing. That's where you got some of the screwy abortion rulings. The Dobbs decision jumped in and said, well, wait a minute. The Supreme Court created all of these things out of thin air. That they don't have the permission to do that. And that's how the Dobbs decision came to be. But conservatives hate it when the courts come in and just make up policy. And so I don't think we would want the court coming in and making up an immigration policy. It's a shame that we have terrible immigration policy and Joe Biden made it worse. But until Congress actually does something to restrain activity on the border and does a comprehensive, I think at a minimum, Joe Biden could say, I'm just going to continue what Donald Trump was doing. But until they have a comprehensive reform, immigration is going to continue to be an issue. It's been an issue so long that when I started in politics, which was working in the Senate in 2007, 2008, something like that, I was working on immigration issues, the very same issues we're working on now. And that tells me we're not actually doing anything. We have ideas, we have things, not much is happening. Lindsay's been very patient. I see Lindsay over there. She's wonderful. Lindsay, what's on your mind?
Well, Cam, I think this is a whole load of baloney, of course.
Mm-hmm.
It makes no sense at all. I don't see how legally they're getting away with it.
Well, I think whether the argument that I see is, well, they didn't, let me back up. They did not have enough of an evidentiary record proving that they were actually injured by this. I'm not buying it. I think there was enough injury there that the court could have decided this and said, this looks like coercion. The other thing to remember is these companies wanted to do what the administration wanted them to do anyway.
Yeah.
And that's concerning to me, is if it's coercion if you're convincing somebody to do something they don't want to do, but if you threaten them to do something they want to do, it's totally fine.
See, that's absolutely backwards.
It's not great, and that means that the stuff that's on your phone, that's in your face,
yes,
might have some government fingerprints on it.
And what can we do about it?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I did. I took it off my phone. I don't have Facebook on my phone anymore.
I've got a Band-Aid on my laptop. Ain't nobody looking at me.
Yeah, no, I understand, Lindsay.
But they're listening.
Yeah.
I say something, and it puts in the next song that I was talking about.
Yeah.
It's listening to me.
I kind of wonder that stuff myself, and there's so many different agreements of, we don't even realize the boilerplate that's signed when we pick up our cell phone, because you have the company that made the cell phone. You have the company so that's like the native hardware. You have all the different companies that have different access permissions to things on your phone. That's another set of agreements, and so on and so forth, such that, yeah, those things that you're carrying around, that everyone carries around, they have a lot of capacity. Let's put it that way.
Well, a lot of capacity goes with your new truck. And by the way, the wife doesn't like it.
She said she did. She was the one that was pushing for it. She loved it.
She's lying. Nobody wants to sit up all that high. Come on now.
She's a big truck girl. They exist.
She's a lion.
No, I asked her, I said, sweetie, and she's like, the cars didn't really fit you. Like, they didn't really look like you. This looks like you. And I think she likes it to go kind of brum brum. She does. I don't think she's lying.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate it, Lindsay. Thank you for the call.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye. So then there's Lindsay, folks. Lindsay's great. We love Lindsay. But yeah, I actually think my wife did like it. I saw that big old grin on her face. It wasn't because I told her, hey, why don't you smile and act like you like this thing? She, I think, genuinely liked it. And she liked the idea of, now, to Lindsay's credit, I think she also liked the idea of my boys throwing their football gear and baseball gear and all that stuff in the back of my truck versus her Expedition. But, she can like it for whatever reason she likes it for. But I just, like I said, when I saw that smile on her face that she enjoyed, and I had a friend from high school that came in town, and I was picking her up at the airport to give her a ride, and I was in my sedan, and she's like, "This doesn't seem like you at all." And that was hurtful. And it reminded me of, sometimes in life we go for the practical option. I get it. There are a lot of practical things, particularly those of us who are parents. We got to do practical things all the time. Every now and then we should just do something because it's fun. And, for me, I'll probably be driving this truck till I'm 50, but I'm going to be happy doing it. And I am deeply practical in so many aspects of my life. So if I have a truck with 6-inch lift that looks like it's ready to go run over some boulders, then a bouldering we shall go. So it's exciting. I'm excited about it. I'm also excited. Matt asked me to come and join everybody for the debate over at Hot Springs in Murfreesboro from 6 to 9 tomorrow. And I think I might take him up on the offer. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. The battle of the octogenarians is to watch old guys get their mics cut off and holler at each other. I love that American politics can get weird, and then we are getting excited about it. And so I'm all in. I think that this is going to be an absolutely wild event to watch. And I don't know. I think we're going to get Spicy Joe. I don't know if that's his best plan. We'll talk about it a little bit on the other side of the break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
New developments in the Highland Park, Illinois, July 4th shooting from 2 years ago, and a big-time benefit concert coming to Music City. That's all coming up at 1 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Well, time flies when you're having fun, and so we'll get into the debate. That's going to come up in the next hour. The IVF stuff, still interesting. Got a couple other interesting topics that we want to discuss in the next hour or two, but I don't want to get started on the debate and then have to go to the break. I also need to hear from y'all out there on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. Lindsay has me concerned that, truck gals aren't a thing. I mean, she's trying to convince me that my wife doesn't actually like the idea of a truck. Y'all got to let me know if she's wrong. I think she is. Sandra said, yeah. Larry said his ex really liked his truck. I just asked Larry if she liked it so much that she took it with her. I guess we'll find out on the other side of the break. I really appreciate you guys being with me. It is so much fun. Like I mentioned, Matt's coming, filling in for Brian. We got the debate coming up at Hop Springs in Murfreesboro. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7. Y'all come back for another 2 hours. We're going to have some fun.
Good afternoon. It's exactly 1 p.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. Yeah, we have clouds rolling in, some rain expected later today. 88 degrees currently, a full forecast in a couple of minutes. The shooter suspected of opening fire on a July 4th parade 2 years ago in Highland Park, Illinois, declined to change his guilty plea today in court. The man named Robert Cremo III is accused of killing 7 people and hurting dozens back in 22. A guilty plea would have led to a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Now his case will go to trial next year, though a life sentence is still possible. Today's court hearing outraged family members of the victims who said they just wanted closure. The attorney, Tony Romanucci, he called out the suspect's actions in court, saying it's an example of the gun violence epidemic in the U.S.
We have a national health crisis of guns in this country, and that's what happens when you unlawfully place a gun in evil's hand. You are going to get a reign of terror. And today, you saw that reign of terror continue with the shooter and his actions.
Back here in Nashville, a big tribute benefit concert's been announced for the city next month.
Toby Keith died in February after a long battle with stomach cancer. He sold more than 40 million records, had 33 #1 hits, and now some of the biggest names in country music are going to pay tribute at Bridgestone Arena, including Luke Bryan, Eric Church, Ashley McBryde, Carrie Underwood, Lainey Wilson, and others. The Toby Keith American Icon live concert event on July 29th will benefit Keith's charity and the Monroe Carroll Jr. Children's Hospital at Vanderbilt. Tickets go on sale Friday on Ticketmaster at 10 o'clock. Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Red, white, and blue. And we just want to remind you now, we've been talking about it and we're excited. We're going to be airing that presidential debate tomorrow night on Super Talk. So if you can't get around to TV, we've got you covered. The debate is set to air at 8 o'clock right after the live radio event we've been talking about. It's in Murfreesboro at Hop Springs. We hope you'll join us for that and the debate watch party tomorrow evening. That is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7. We're in the second hour. I was going to look at what temperature it is outside, but it's hot. So it's largely irrelevant. I am tired of people telling me what it feels like because it's hot. If someone tells me that I need to wear loose clothing, again, I'm going to scream. One, I have the body type of a lowland mountain gorilla, so loose clothing isn't really a thing. But the idea that, everything will be better if I drink water, wear loose clothing, and try to not go outside. Come on, this is the South. It's going to be blistering hot from now through, October. And we live here and we love it, so we need to suck it up. The idea that a little sweat is bad, get good deodorant. Just do. Make sure you're not stanky. But yes, it continues to be hot. It is good to go outside, encounter the heat, because if you do it regularly enough and quit being afraid of it, then you get used to it. And once you get more used to it, then you actually have to turn down the AC inside because you get really cold. So very exciting. Anyway, more exciting, 2 very old men debating tomorrow night. Very excited about this. I think these are the candidates we've deserved. I've put out columns basically saying that Republicans are all in with Donald Trump. Democrats have made their bed with Joe Biden. And I know what's going to happen. I've seen this debate before. Literally. They're going to go, Joe Biden's going to mumble through some stuff. We just saw the State of the Union. We know what's going to happen. And then Donald Trump is going to wander. He'll be throwing out one thing. And here's the deal. I want to be very specific about Trump's style on this. Trump is very authentic. He is himself, more so than any politician I've seen in a very long time. He's not trying to convince you of the Trump illusion. He's that way. He's very genuinely who he is. And he gets out there and he's got campaign people that are trained in conventional campaigns. They are telling him things like, you've set the bar too low. You need to now pivot at the 11th hour before this debate and talk about him being a worthy opponent after you've said he's the worst opponent. And I'll show you what I mean. There's this a rally Saturday in Philadelphia, and Trump does the Sleepy Joe, Crooked Joe thing. Here's a quote from Trump. Quote, he's sleeping now, talking about Biden, because they want to get him good and strong, so a little before debate time, he gets a shot in the, well, you know what? They want to strengthen him up. I'll say he'll come out all jacked up, right? All jacked up. And then he flips it the other way and says, quote, but anyway, I'm sure he'll be prepared. Whatever happened to all that cocaine that was missing a month ago from the White House? And then he changed the subject. And he can't decide his approach because his approach is uniquely him. It's, I riff, I go from one topic to the next, I feed off the momentum and energy of the crowd, and that's what I do. And he's got campaign people in his ear trying to tell him what he needs to do strategically, and so he's trying to pivot between his instincts and what the campaign folks are telling him to do. And I think what I'm a little concerned about is the lack of audience. That to me seems to be the thing that we're glossing over and could have serious implications for Trump, because Trump is better. This is coming from me. I call balls and strikes when it comes to Trump. Trump is better than any politician I've seen recently in feeding off crowd emotion, figuring out where they're going, and he kind of matches their energy, right? That's not going to happen. Furthermore, and I've actually advocated for being able to cut the mics because I think the debates are insufferable when everybody's just talking over everybody all the time. So I think that's useful for the purpose of actually having a debate. I think it's going to hurt Trump because what's going to happen is his mic's going to get cut off, and he's still going to have a tendency to want to talk and keep going. We've seen that in every debate. He likes to throw a bomb in the room after when somebody makes a point, instead, as opposed to waiting his turn. He likes to respond immediately and try to taunt them and pull them off topic. I don't think that's going to be as easy for him to do when Jake Tapper's got the mic button. And so we'll see. I don't get, initially, I thought that Biden was a fool for doing this, that this was a bad idea because Trump just shreds folks on the debate stage. And that was true in the format of the Commission on Presidential Debates. This seems a little bit different for me. And I do think that Republicans across the board, including, a lot of those of us in the commentary space, have made the mistake of repeatedly pointing out Joe Biden's physical frailty, of pointing out he's said a lot of things, he's misspoken, he's done these, that's public record. You can see it, you can look at it. But when the expectation is basically for him to stand up there and drool and then fall over, as long as he doesn't do that, it seems like a win. And that same phenomena happened with the State of the Union. He was fiery. I thought Joe Biden was serviceable, but he was trying to match Trump in the State of the Union when Trump wasn't there. That's what he felt like, the spicy Joe. I'm fiery, I'm going to get your snacks to be right-sized. Like, that was the kind of thing that he was throwing out there. But he was doing it, and he was almost angry, which is not his jam. Now, if he brings that, which obviously he was a couple months ago capable of doing that, I suspect he's capable of doing that again in a context where Trump's there. We'll see how that looks. It might look like grumpy old men. I don't really know how that back and forth interplay works. I do see Biden's tactic being let Trump talk. Let him try to talk over you. Let him push him out there. That should be Trump's same tactic. If I'm advising Trump, you're winning on the issues. Talk about how you did on the issues over your 4 years. Don't get drawn into his fights and make him explain more about his record. Because in immigration, he's going to lose. Biden's going to lose. On inflation, Biden's going to lose. I'd argue on foreign affairs, Biden's going to lose. It's just not a good setup for him right now. And I think what we're finding is, if we can keep this about the issues, if Trump can keep Biden explaining his failures, Trump's going to win this debate. If Biden can make it about Trump, he's going to win the debate. Because that was his only game plan. That's still his only game plan. Make it about Trump, watch Trump implode. Watch Trump stick his foot in his mouth, let his ego take over. That's Biden's sole plan. This was, as y'all recall, you were there for this. Joe Biden basically hid on the campaign trail, created a referendum on Trump. If I'm Joe Biden, I'm trying to pull in the New York case, trying to pull in the other cases. I would try to get Donald Trump to commit to not pardoning himself, not ending the cases. And say, if you're elected president, are you going to stop the investigations into you? Are you going to stop the legal proceedings? I think that's an attack point. If I'm Trump, I just say, if I win, the American people will have made their choice. Because I think that's something that I've seen is, well, Democrats expect Trump to continue these investigations even if he's elected. And my point is, if he is elected, that says that the American people have decided that these aren't persuasive, and they've given him the power to unilaterally end them. And I think, for example, in the documents case, I think there's some strong legal arguments to be made. I am not in the camp that says all this stuff is purely a political show. But I absolutely believe, and I think for the health of democracy, that if Donald Trump is elected president of the United States, he absolutely has the right to tell the Department of Justice, these are over. Because the American people will have put him in the position to do that. And I think you have to respect that, even if you don't like that. It's not respecting Donald Trump. It's not respecting DOJ. It's respecting the American people, saying, we know all of this. We see all of the indictments against this guy, and we're still going to elect him. And if that indeed happens, and oh my goodness, I can tell you the screaming, and I'll use the word caterwauling, that will happen from the left if Trump or directs the Department of Justice to drop the cases against him. But I think that if our republic's going to work, the voice of the people has to matter. Similarly, if Joe Biden wins this election, those cases are going to proceed. And I don't think I understand how folks might be upset about that, and there will be all kind of gnashing of teeth from the right side of things. But I've said this for years, elections have consequences, and they should. In a republic where the people get to decide who governs them, it has to matter. And I think that we kind of forget that sometimes, that we say, well, it should go my way, the way I want it, even if I don't win the election. No, it shouldn't. That's why we have them, is to decide what direction that we're going to go in. So I think that this is going to be an interesting debate. I don't think, I hear folks talking about who's going to be hopped up on what. We've got drinking games that we're talking about on the Super Talk text line. Jason over there saying that I'm lying because there's all this stuff about the heat, lots of untruths about the heat. Well, it's hot, Jason. That's just the way it is. Larry did get back. I know y'all were concerned. Larry did get back to me that his ex didn't take away his V8 Avalanche. She has to pay him alimony, so that truck is safe. That's good there. I like to read the detractors. 9069 says, there has to be someone to fill in that's more interesting than this guy. If the goal is to bore us to tears with monotone drivel, mission accomplished. Well, I'm doing my best, but the monotone drivel is what we're expecting from Biden in this debate performance. And this is the central event that we've been told we need to get ready for. And good grief.
He's not going to be monotone during the debate. They're going to juice him up on whatever they gave him for the State of the Union. And he's going to get up there and pound the podium and talk about, how he's for the little guy.
I'm for the little guy. You will have full gallons of ice cream. I don't get it.
Mine's the gallons presidency, ice cream and gas.
Todd
together.
Todd on the Super Talk text line says, ouch. Todd, this is part of the territory. When you're a columnist and you do radio and you put your opinion out there, it's important to engage folks that disagree and don't like things. I've been really upset. Ray, ever since he hung up on me a couple weeks ago, hasn't been chiming back in and telling me why I'm wrong. And I live for it. I need it. I like that. The idea, thank you, Larry. Larry says I should tell my detractors to screw off. I don't think I'm going to do that, but I appreciate Larry's sense. We talk about Joe Biden and being on something. I think that's a distraction for us, too. Because, one, there are a lot of things you could be on. Suggesting, for example, cocaine. I would literally pay to watch a presidential debate where someone was high on cocaine. That would be hilarious. A lot of the stuff that is available, a lot of the uppers that are available aren't really conducive to thoughtful responses to questions in a debate format. So I don't know if Joe Biden, has a formula that gets him going. I'd sure like to know what it is. But I think it is, as Trump pointed out, get some sleep, do a lot of debate prep, and then he's throwing it all down, putting all his energy out there. Now, do I think he probably has to sleep for 3 days after one of these? Sure. But I think that's my concern right now. Aaron made a comment on the Super Talk text lines. What we currently have is no faith in our electoral process. Now there's attack on the viability and veracity of the Supreme Court. It's now being questioned by the left. Aaron, that's a good point, but everybody's questioning everything that's unfavorable to them. Let's be honest about that. Everybody is questioning what is unfavorable to them. So the prosecutions against Donald Trump, so many politicians on the right have said, well, these are all political, blah, blah, blah. This is all garbage. Well, the Bragg stuff, a lot of that was garbage. I've said that on the air. I've written about it, that was a Frankenstein case put together in a jurisdiction that hated Trump by a politician who campaigned on, quote, holding him accountable. That it smelled funny to me from the beginning, and I hope that that's overturned on appeal. All the cases are not created equal. Like I mentioned, that Docs case, that looks a lot more serious. But the point is, when Republicans see something they don't like, they undermine the legal system. I've seen Senator Tommy Tuberville and other folks out saying that, the U.S. legal system's corrupt. No, it's not. It's just not. That's just not true. And so Republicans do that. And then Democrats, their favorite target is the Supreme Court. Like Nancy Pelosi came out and said, they've gone rogue. Durbin, Schumer folks calling them out saying, I think it was Schumer said, you'll reap the whirlwind for your decisions that related to the hearing prior to Dobbs being decided. The bottom line is our political class is the enemy here, folks. Your confidence is being eroded in the justice system. The justice system is a big thing. You got state, you got federal, you got all kinds of judges, and most of those judges are pretty good. A lot of the prosecutors, pretty good, pretty fair. Not all of them. But the political class is smart, and it says, let's undermine our faith in the justice system because it benefits the political class. Anytime the political class can do better by attacking other branches of government, that's what they do. And that's what you should be concerned about. And that is the bigger challenge that we're facing and something we need to deal with. Right now, we need to deal with the fact we got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
A mistake at the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll explain what that's about. And an Illinois man charged with child sex crimes in Sumner County. We'll have those stories at 1:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
All right, welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith. Aaron made a point on the Super Talk text line. He said, agreed, we have a severe distrust default right now. So during the COVID, there were both sides saying either enforce mask mandates or ban masks. Here's this question. What do you think would be required to get back to an actual discussion of healthy debate and respect of other viewpoints? Man, that's the $1 million question. Most of us naturally want affirmation versus information. We want people to tell us that our views are correct and just pile on. You all hear this all the time, you know, whether it's cable news or talk radio or things you read. Everybody is self-selecting for stuff that doesn't challenge them. And when it challenges them, they're like, oh, well, you're awful. You're the worst. I get this a lot because I actually try to do that. I don't believe that as a conservative, I have to, be on team Republican, team Democrat. I believe that the ideas matter, the policies matter. And if folks are doing things to scare people I care about, then I have a duty and responsibility to come out and say, don't be afraid. Because I've learned that fear is the tool of politicians. If I can make you afraid, you'll do what I say and you won't look. We can talk about it on the other side of the break, but there's no better issue to illustrate this point than immigration. No better issue. Immigration has been a pain in the tail for decades. We haven't had a game plan to secure the border. We haven't had a game plan to have an orderly system of immigration, orderly system of asylum. There's a lot of basic blocking and tackling that just hasn't happened because we haven't updated our immigration laws. What happens is Republicans like to use the issue to gain political control by saying, we've got to look at all the people getting killed. Look at these horrific crimes committed against children, against women, against pick the instance that you want to use. Democrats use it for the kids in cages. They say, well, look at these racist Republicans who they want to be punishing people because of the color of their skin. Both sides want the issue. We can solve the issue. It's not rocket science. It's pretty basic. You end the magnet that attracts people to come. You secure the borders in a common sense fashion. That doesn't mean wall everywhere. Somewhere wall doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. But there are other means to secure that same patch of border. And to have a updated system that makes sense based on the actual needs of the American economy and American people. This is, again, not a crazy difficult thing to address like our politicians make it sound, because they'd rather you be afraid, they'd rather you be scared, as opposed to solving the issue. And that's the truth. I don't have to like it, but that's the truth. And I'll give you some more anecdotes and also some evidence and some research on this topic when we come back after the debate. I'm so ready for the debate. I'm calling the radio show the debate. It's Matt Murphy Show. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Good afternoon. It is 1:31. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. We've got mostly cloudy skies. We're up to 90 degrees. We'll get the weather forecast to you here shortly. A mistake at the Supreme Court. The premature posting of what looks like the decision in a closely watched abortion case. ABC's Stephen Portnoy reports from D.C.
A Supreme Court spokeswoman says a document about a ruling was posted inadvertently and briefly on the court's website. It It's no longer available, and no decision of the High Court is final until it is formally released. But Bloomberg News reports this posting indicated the court will allow emergency abortions to continue in Idaho for now under a lower federal court order, despite state law saying they can only be performed to prevent the death of the pregnant woman.
Back here in Middle Tennessee, an Illinois man facing numerous charges in Middle Tennessee related to child sex crimes. The Hendersonville Police Department said it launched an investigation into Matthew Moklak, 19 years of age, for sexual exploitation of a minor. That investigation led to U.S. Marshals executing arrest warrants last week at Moklak's home in Villa Park, Illinois. Authorities say the charges against the young man include 20 counts of especially aggravated sexual exploitation of a minor, 1 count of solicitation of a minor, and 1 count of continuous sexual abuse of a child. Police today said that Moklak is currently being extradited to Sumner County. And quickly, we've been talking about it because we're so excited. We're going to be airing the presidential debate tomorrow night here on Super Talk. The debate set to air at 8 o'clock, right after the radio live event at Hop Springs in Murfreesboro. We hope you'll join us for that and the debate watch party happening tomorrow night. That is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
welcome back. When we last talked, I was pointing out the fact that both sides of the political class, Republicans and Democrats, use issues to scare us so that we give them more clout as opposed to just reasonably talking about the issues. Immigration is an easy one because it's easy to take these horrific, brutal crimes, plaster them everywhere, and then say, well, see, this is the thing. Well, the left does this with the kids in cages, right? The left takes the same issue and says that by enforcing immigration law, you're doing horrible things. Those, for Republicans, they're like, well, no, we enforce the law, but we don't let kids stay with their parents if they get picked up and taken to jail. You know, why would this be different? This is breaking the law. I understand that. On the Super Talk text line, let's do a little experiment real quick. We know the cases, because you've heard them on the station, the cases that have resulted in rapes and murders and brutalities along the border. We mentioned Houston, elsewhere in the United States, where illegal immigrants have committed crimes, right? Let me give out the number again. Members Nutrition text line, 615-737-9986, 615-737-9986. Here's what I want to see from y'all. I pulled up the Nashville.gov, Metro Government of Nashville and Davidson County, map of crimes committed over the last week. What do you think? And again, these are incidents. They haven't been proven in a court of law. These are just incidents and what has been reported to police and where those things happen. How many rapes do you think have happened in the last week? Homicides, aggravated assaults, violent offenses. How many do you think? Because when we talk about these anecdotes in the immigration context, I want to use just an example out of our backyard. How about this? 1 homicide, 9 rapes, 127 aggravated assaults, 40 residential burglaries. That's a tough word to say. 100 auto thefts, 165 violent offenses. Most of those, the vast majority, in fact, we have not heard about. They don't make headlines. That's just in our backyard. And so my question to you is, we can all report the anecdotes that are being used on the immigration front and say, these are the crimes. Look, these are horrible. There's the 12-year-old girl. There's the 37-year-old woman. I can go down the list and talk about them and how barbaric and awful and terrible they are. As a matter of crime, how are they any different than the 9 rapes? Well, you could say, well, they shouldn't be here. Agreed. That is a separate issue. They shouldn't be here. Agreed. But crime is crime and needs to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And so when we have, in 1 week in Nashville, just a wild number of criminal instances that are violent, that are horrific in their own right, and we don't even hear about them, we need to start asking why. Why do we not hear about these things? Why don't they even really make any headlines? When at scale, just in one area, Metro, Nashville, Davidson County, that area, why, when we have such a concentration in 1 week, do these separate instances have infinitely more clout, and why do we hear so much more about them? Because it's politically expedient. It fits a good narrative. That's the truth. Joe Biden has been an abject failure on immigration. The reason that I know that is because I can see the apprehension numbers. That's an actual good metric to look at and see, man, we had a flood come in over the last several years. It's not close. And I understand that the criminality is a good argument, but the truth is a lot of folks that are in the country without status want to stay as far from the police radar as they can because they don't want to get picked up and deported. Northwestern had a research done that said over a 150-year-old period, immigrants' incarceration rate was only slightly lower than that of U.S.-born men. However, in more recent time, immigrants are 60% less likely to be incarcerated than U.S.-born citizens and 30% less likely relative to U.S.-born whites. And so, y'all have heard this stuff. You know, for me and a lot of folks, I think it goes in one ear and out the other. I mean, you're going to have a criminal element in any, and I mean any, cohort of people. The fact that you have people here that shouldn't be here, that have no legal right to be here, have no legal status, that's a separate issue, and that's one that we need to address. The reason that these things are highlighted is to create the motive to get the political power. But here's the problem, and I understand that this is an uncomfortable argument to make. If you get the political power, what should you do with it? Well, the obvious answer is solve the problem. Go secure the border. Go create an orderly system of immigration. And that has not happened. I know because I'm a policy nerd that has worked on the issue. New Zealand has an excellent points-based system that says based on your economic demands, here's who you need to in and here's who you need to prevent. The asylum system in the United States is dumb. You basically get to raise your hand and say, hey, I claim asylum. And then you're paroled into the United States while you await a lengthy process. The Langford bill that everybody panned had a process in there that would shorten that cycle by over a year. It would have basically said, you got to decide this thing quickly. It would allow people to basically deny claims quickly, wrap that up so they don't just get let out into the United States. That was panned. You need to ask yourself why. It's because politicians want the issue. They've wanted the issue for decades now. It's absolutely ridiculous that they can't solve something as simple as immigration. And they will all tell you, well, it's complicated, it's complex. No, it's not. The levers and pulleys that we have in the system, yes, there's all kinds of different laws. There's bars to reentry once you're found, to have made an immigration violation. But it's pretty basic on its face. Do you have a secure border, and do you have an orderly system of immigration that makes sense to meet your economic demands or not? And if you want the family unification to be a thing where, one person migrates for work and then you want to bring everybody else, okay, that's a policy point that we can talk about. It's also one we can disagree on. But whatever that system is, we just need to introduce legislation, amend it, vote on it, and move with it. Because right now, what we've got is so radically outdated, and the details do matter. And the political class says, well, I could do a lot of work and have folks get mad at me because I compromise and have to come up with something that works for everybody. Or I could just scare the crap out of the people on the issue. And I want you to hear very clearly what I'm saying. I'm not arguing at all that Joe Biden is good on the issue of immigration. He's horrific. But the idea that you hear about the most horrible cases that happen that are committed at the hands of immigrants, if you need that to convince you we have a broken system of immigration, then you don't really care about the issue. Because the truth is, he's failed so significantly, and so is Congress. Let's not let Congress off the hook here. The fact that we arrest people, we deport some of them, they come back, we do it again, and we just kind of keep this cycle. At some point, we need to say, hey, maybe these people that are doing this stuff, that are committing crimes and doing it, aren't good actors, and we need to find a way to keep them out. We are not effective at doing that. The southern border, the southwest border, land border, is a big place. It's not like we build a little fortress. It is a long border, and there's a lot of holes in it and a lot of places where people can go. And even if you build fence, we see pictures of wall, fence, whatever you want. People dig holes under it. They cut through it. They figure out ways because we just simply do not have the manpower to station human beings there, but we do have the technology. We could absolutely address some of this stuff if we wanted to solve the issue as opposed to making it a political talking point. Brian, I'm about to have to go to a break in about 2 minutes, but we got time for your call. What do you think?
Well, Cam, I think you were filling in a year ago, 6 months ago, sometime for Matt. And somebody called in, and whenever the hearings were going on about Biden and them prosecuting him for various crimes, and I think you said, but call in if you think he committed a crime and what crime he committed. And because you said you didn't think he committed a crime. I called in. I didn't get on, I don't think, but I thought it was dereliction of duty. I don't know if that's a crime. I think it is. Treason. High crimes and misdemeanors. He's guilty of all that, and it's pretty easily proven. But this, and I must have missed some of your what you were talking about. I hope I did. Anyway,
okay.
Did you mention? And you're an attorney. I don't know if you're not practicing. Are you practicing?
Yeah, I mean, I deal with this with the corporation, and what capacity are you talking about? Because lawyers do a bunch of different things.
Wasn't the law called 287G?
Yes.
That Darren Hall said he would not enforce at some point during all this.
287G is that's where you basically cooperate with local law enforcement to enforce federal immigration law.
Okay, but Darren Hall said he wouldn't enforce it any longer at some point, right? Because of overcrowding or whatever reason.
Yeah, there's the federal government hasn't used it, and localities have decided they don't want to work with the federal government, so it kind of depends on the specific instance.
Well, my only question is simple. Like you say, this whole thing is pretty simple. Why? Why don't we use that if it's a law that you're illegal, you're not a newcomer, you're not a visitor.
You're here without legal status.
Yes, and you might be a criminal.
Sure.
So why aren't we doing that anymore?
Because people don't want to. They like talking about it. It can be done, and it should be done.
I know, but is it a law in the books that's still enforced?
So the reason that 287G is relevant is because, think of it this way. This was kind of some of the argument in the Trump trial. And, Brian, thank you for your call. I do appreciate it. But the Alvin Bragg was trying to say, well, this federal crime of election stuff I'm going to use to bootstrap some of this misdemeanor stuff. Typically, states enforce state law. Immigration law is the province of the federal government. By and large, there's a couple of overlaps and things like that. But the 287G program is basically saying we can work together on this. That local law enforcement, when they've picked somebody up and they say they don't have legal status, they turn them over to immigration and customs enforcement, and then they're processed. What has happened is that a sanctuary city like a San Francisco or something will say, no, we won't do that. We're not going to uphold any federal law. We're not going to uphold immigration law. And the federal government doesn't have the resources to be in all of these cities. So the 287G program is awesome. I think it's absolutely something that we should have, but it requires cooperation between different levels of government. And that hasn't been the case in a lot of the most problematic areas. And let's call a spade a spade. A lot of these are very democratic cities that have had this sort of problem, and they don't want to cooperate on enforcing immigration law, and it's a huge issue. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Good afternoon. It's 2 p.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. We've had clouds roll in. We are at 90 degrees. A full forecast is on the way. House Speaker Johnson says that former President Trump should easily win tomorrow's debate with President Biden. Andy Field, he's in D.C.
House Speaker Mike Johnson using his weekly government news conference to campaign for Donald Trump's win in the debate.
You're going to see a sharp contrast between President Trump's positive agenda and Joe Biden's proven weakness.
Speaker Johnson saying he spent time with the former president at his Florida home recently and that Mr. Trump is excited and ready for Thursday night.
And, of course, we will be airing the presidential debate tomorrow night here on Super Talk. The debate's set to get underway at 8 o'clock our time. That's right after the live radio event at Hop Springs in Murfreesboro. We hope to see you there to join us for that radio event and the debate watch party. All right, we now switch over to Goodlettsville, where police say they arrested a man who was covered in evidence of what indicated there had been a violent attack.
News 2 says officers were dispatched to a stabbing call Monday night on Alto Loma Road. They found a woman bleeding from the neck. She said she had arrived home after going out and started fighting with her boyfriend. She claims attacked her with a box cutter knife. The girlfriend was rushed to a hospital with critical injuries to her neck. Officers say they caught 43-year-old Derek Tidwell coming out of a back door, clothes covered in blood. Tidwell is charged with attempted criminal homicide. Bond was set for $150,000. Ken Weaver, WTN News.
That is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
Welcome back to the final hour of the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in today. Matt will be joining shortly as he's hosting Brian's show today. The Drive, which is wonderful. And it's going to be, I suspect Matt's going to talk about the debate and forecasting what he thinks is going to happen. We're talking about immigration and both parties using it as a football without actually solving the issue. And I want to talk about what this is going to be wild. We say, well, Biden's not enforcing immigration law. True. I want to talk about what that law actually is and why Congress needs to act, because there's a clear hole in it. And I'll show that to you in just a moment. But Don's been really patient, so I want to get him on the southern border. Don, what do you got?
Hey, can you hear me, guys?
I can hear you.
All right. I've got a multi-pronged solution to the southern border and immigration.
Okay.
First off, I think when we have everybody coming over the border, we need to do a ID system similar to like what the military has. You have the military member, and then you have dependent.
Sure.
Okay. Then with that, you have, instead of the member, you have a worker. So anybody in the family that's wanting to come over, you have a worker. And then they have all the dependents. And with that, we should have an immigration work tax. Let them work, but tax them based on how many dependents they have.
Sure, and typically on that, like an H-1B visa or an H-2A, like we have different classes of visas that people can come in and work on. A lot of times those workers come in and they don't have dependents. You know, they send the money back home. You're saying that if they did come in and they wanted to bring their families to work, then they'd be taxed based on the number of dependents that they brought over. Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Yeah, kind of like what one of the presidents back in the past, we had an income tax that was like, you know, based on the number of dependents and all that. But do it where the more dependents, and that could raise taxes in the billions of dollars, because the workers don't get taxed hardly anything when they do come in.
Well, I mean, if folks are paying folk under the table and they're not taxing earnings, then they're breaking the law. And so it goes back to enforcing the existing law.
Right. Well, with that, if we can get that passed where they have to pay the taxes, at the end of the year, they have to show their income and pay taxes on that, and if not, deport them.
Yeah, well, the problem in the first place is when folks are in the country without legal status. If they're there with legal status to come in and work, and they're supposed to work according to the law. But it's what happens when people don't follow the law.
Right. So if we made it mandatory that all immigrants get the ID and go through all of that, then if they're not documented and have the ID, you know, and can show that ID, then they can be deported and put on a terrorist watch group or whatever, however they want to do it.
So let me ask you a question. So I'm assuming you have a driver's license. You have an ID, right?
Yes.
So if you don't have that on you and the police pick you up and they say, show me your ID, and you don't have it, could they then deport you?
No, under the law, no, you end up going to court. And if you can show it then, you know.
So if they told you you don't have any identification on you, you now got to come to court and you got to prove that you are a U.S. citizen who can stay here.
Yes.
Man, I'd fight that law all day long, because if a police officer comes to me and I'm not committing a crime, and as a citizen, if I lose my ID, you get to tell me I have to come to court and prove I am who I am? No way. I absolutely not. I'm a United States citizen. I don't have to carry ID to everywhere I go. If I want to go to the pool and jump in and don't have an ID on me, and a police officer comes up and says, "Show me your ID." If I haven't committed a crime, then I shouldn't be able to do that.
I understand that part of it, but I mean, of course, me being a U.S. citizen and everything, I know my ID number. I know my driver's license number. I have it memorized. I know I'm not like most, but I used to be a truck driver too.
Sure, and I understand that. And let's say I have mine memorized too, and I tell the police officer, this is my ID. My question is, why should I have to? If I'm not committing a crime or have been suspected of committing a crime, why should I have to tell the police anything?
Right. I'm just saying that, okay, if they haven't committed a crime, then more than likely they're here, okay, they've lost their ID or something like that. That's all well and fine,
But then my question, Don, is, well, how do we enforce that? I mean, who should the police ask for their ID to see if they're citizens?
If they break the law.
If they break the law. Okay, got it.
Okay. It's just a way of helping keep track, just like, hey, I know the government keeps track of, where you are, where you live. You've got to update your address on your driver's license if you move and everything like that.
Sure.
And that way, the taxes that we would collect off of the immigrants can help go to support the schools where their kids are at, sure, and anything like that. Okay?
So basically you're telling me they need to pay taxes on what they earn, and what I'm telling you is a lot of them do, who are, working lawfully in the United States. The ones that aren't, that are doing it under the table, then I would agree with you wholeheartedly. We need to stop that. But that's, again, it goes to the point of we're not doing a good job of enforcing these laws.
Well, okay, I worked at a factory years ago, and there was a lot of Hispanic immigrants that came to work there.
Okay.
And me being a supervisor there, I saw a lot of the immigrants' checks, and the only taxes they were really paying was the FICA tax.
Which is a tax. I mean, that's your employment taxes.
Yeah. But the FICA tax is like, back then they were paying like $12 a week in taxes.
Well, it's what is it, 7.5% for each side? Employer pays half, the worker pays half. I mean, that's pretty standard. They have to pay tax on the income if they're required to under the law. Right. And they have to have adequate withholding for that. But, that's, again, federal tax law. So I appreciate the call, Don, and I think Don's on it, that we've got to be able to enforce the law. But the problem, and this is what I wanted to get to you with these guys, with this. So we hear about enforcing the law. Well, which laws? Here's a mind bender for you. Overstaying your visa is not a criminal violation, but it's civil. The two criminal federal pieces of federal law related to illegal immigrations, 8 U.S.C. 1325 makes it a crime to unlawfully enter the United States. So coming across the southern border, not coming in at a point of entry, that's a crime. What kind of crime? A first offense is a misdemeanor punishable by a fine of up to 6 months in prison. So it's a misdemeanor. The second statute that folks get criminally prosecuted for immigration violations is illegal reentry, 8 U.S.C. 1326. Makes it a crime to unlawfully reenter. So if you've been deported and then you come back in unlawful reentry. But if I come in under a work visa, if I come in under a student visa, if I come in lawfully in any other way, if I come in on a vacation and I have the appropriate visa, and then I overstay it, that is a civil enforcement. And so that to me is a good example of the ability to process these things quickly and efficiently. If we're filing civil suit against somebody that's overstayed, to have them deported and having the different hearings and having to work through the court systems, that's a different animal than the criminal. And the criminal even then is, okay, you've come in unlawfully. How do I know that? Unless you've committed a crime. And that's what I was talking about Don with. Is I'm assuming most of you listening to the sound of my voice don't think it's appropriate for law enforcement to go around based on the color of people's skins, their languages, their ethnicities, and say, hey, you got to prove to me that you didn't unlawfully enter the country. That's not, it's one thing when you're on the southern border and you see somebody coming across, but Nashville's far from the southern border. Let's say there's somebody here without legal status. Well, how is law enforcement supposed to ascertain that if they're not committing a crime? The moment that you commit a crime or you do something that is legally, that gives probable cause, then they can come in and say, okay, who are you? Show me your identification. But just if you're just out and about on the street, I don't think we want law enforcement trying to figure out, based on the way people look and sound, whether they need to prove to law enforcement that they're U.S. citizens. I mean, that could go south real fast. So I say that to give you the facts, because one of the things that I don't ever want to do with you guys is scare you into just agreeing with the normal political narrative. I have no interest in benefiting the political class. I have worked in Congress and I have seen how this stuff goes. And there's so much of a desire to keep you guys afraid because scared people are stupid. And I don't want you to be stupid. And again, this is Congress, right? It's a crime to unlawfully enter, and it's a crime to unlawfully re-enter. If we create a situation where if you just overstay a visa, then it's civil, it's not a criminal thing, well, we probably need to address that and say, okay, let's at least make it a misdemeanor. You know, let's at least make it like unlawfully entering the United States, that, hey, if your visa says you can be here for a month and you're here for, more than a week after that, then you can get picked up for that because we know who you are. We have documentation. I think the problem is twofold. One, that you don't have a secure border, and that when you apprehend people on the border, we do the absolutely insane thing of paroling them into the United States. Now, understand, you can't just take people that you get on the border and fly them on an airplane and dump them off somewhere, because that may not be where they're from. For example, if we took our folks who crossed the border illegally and we put them on a plane and send them to the United Kingdom would get a little upset. They would say, well, why do we have to deal with the problem? These folks are in your country. You apprehended them there. And so that's where immigration does get a little more complicated, in that we have basically deportation agreement or repatriation agreements with folks and with countries, and we have to use those to get people from the United States back to where they came from. In some countries, like Venezuela, we may not have a repatriation agreement with, so we don't have necessarily somewhere for them to go. So the idea of sending someone from Venezuela back to Mexico, well, Mexico's going to say, why is it our problem? They're Venezuelan. They're not Mexican. And so that's some of the complexity here. But the problem is Congress hasn't addressed it. They haven't done what they were supposed to do, and we're paying the consequences. So the next time a politician says, well, look at the crimes they've committed, or look at all these immigration, the answer needs to be, what have you done to make sure that we have a solution to this? Because several of y'all have made the correct point of, well, let's just say that illegal immigrants commit crimes at the same rates or even lower rates than the rest of the population. It doesn't matter. They weren't supposed to be here in the first place. To which I would say I agree. That means that the bigger issue is one of Congress, one of set up these border controls. And if you ask me point blank, who's better on immigration, Donald Trump or Joe Biden? The answer is Donald Trump. It's not a close call here. But really, the failure is on Congress to actually address the issue. They have not done it because they like the issue. They like talking about the issue. They like scaring you into giving them more power so that they can be in office and not solve the issue. If I listen to any more politicians tell me about the legislation they introduced, well, build me the coalition. Show me that you can actually do something useful in enacting an immigration law that fixes some of this stuff versus introducing your messaging bills and saying you're a hard worker. It's just not true. We need to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Changes in the Donald Trump gag order in his New York hush money trial, and protests ramping up in Israel. We'll have those stories at 2:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back, folks. We've only got about a half hour left in the Matt Murphy Show. Then Matt will be filling in on the drive for Brian Wilson. So stay tuned. That should be excellent. I haven't seen him running around the studio so far. I wanted to get to a couple callers before we hit the half hour break. Tom in Kentucky has some thoughts on immigration. Tom, what you got?
Yeah, I've talked to Matt last week concerning taxes. I'm talking to you about immigration, and everybody seems to be worried about the problem, including you. I agree with you on the law and everything else, but how do you find out who, what, when, and where? Is follow the money trail. I mean, how many millions and billions of dollars are we paying to house people that are illegal, to feed them, to send them to school? They won't tell us. The government won't tell us. I mean, we're what, $36 trillion in debt, and we're still giving money away? Yeah. I mean, come on, people. I would like to help them too. But the idea we can't keep affording this, because when we hit 40 trillion, and we will, or even 50, we're going to be in the same boat.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Tom. My question is enforcing immigration law. How do we do that better than we're doing it right now? Because it's clearly not happening right now.
Well, right now you have to shut down the border, and I totally agree with you, and we've got to do that so that we can control what's coming across that border and follow the law as it is. It's not that the law is bad. It's the idea it's not being enforced. And when you talk about the president of the federal government, you know, if I don't follow a law, I go to jail. If they don't follow a law, oh, well, who cares?
Yeah.
They ought to go to jail, too.
You're talking about the prosecutors and the folks in the federal government who are failing to do their job.
And keep on going, yes.
Yeah, and
all the way up.
And the flip side, I would say, if you fail to do your job, do you go to jail?
If I break the law, yes, I do.
You're right, and
and that's what I'm getting. I'm not saying my job. I'm saying break the law. Now, if my job is to enforce the law, and I refuse to do that, I'm breaking the law.
Right. I would argue that, and the Supreme Court has said as much in this context, is that they're deciding how they enforce the law. They see the law and they're saying, we obviously can't catch and prosecute everyone, so we're prosecuting these. That's the rationale for DACA. I'm not saying it's a good argument. I'm simply saying they're saying we're making choices about who to prosecute, and making choices about who to prosecute is not in and of itself a criminal violation that you can put them in jail for.
Well, then send them back home.
Well, that's why we have elections, and I think that's a good plan. I appreciate the call, Tom. I think he's on it. And I think that's the recourse. And I think that's why, on the issue of immigration, Joe Biden's getting crushed, is because folks say, wait a minute. Like, I want to help immigrants as much as anybody. We shouldn't be cruel, but we have a process here, and we should follow the process, because it's not fair to other immigrants who are following the process not to enforce the law, not to say this is how you become a citizen. This is how you enter the country legally. This is, I mean, when we allow for the rule of law to be broken, we hurt a lot of people. And I think that's why on the issue Joe Biden is losing is not because he's not being empathetic with immigrants. It's because in not enforcing the law and not having a game plan to have that structure, he's actually doing more harm than good to the people he's saying he wants to help. And that to me is a huge, huge problem when your best intentions, I'll give Biden credit for that and say, well, he intends to do right, but has an absolute failure of execution. He's not able to do what he needs to do to make that case. Because if he said, well, I'm enforcing the law and we're doing what we need to do, we've secured the border, we're deporting people who need to be deported, but I don't think that's fair. I think we should do something different. Then he can go to Congress and do that. That's not what he's doing. He's simply saying, I reversed the Trump policies and we're doing a bad job of enforcing current immigration law, and that's hurting him in the polls, which is where it should. We got to take another break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Good afternoon. It's 2:31. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. We've got scattered clouds, 91 degrees on Music Row. A complete forecast is coming up. Tomorrow night, President Biden and former President Trump will square off in the first debate of the election season, and Trump will be able to speak about aspects of the hush money case as Judge Juan Merchan lifted portions of the gag order. Here's more from ABC's Rachel Scott.
The fact that we now have the judge only partially lifting this gag order so that the former president can talk about the witnesses in this case, including his former fixer, Michael Cohen. He can also talk about the jury, but it's still very limited for the former president in the sense that he cannot go after the prosecutors or the prosecutor's family. Trump, of course, still not happy either way. He says he wants this to be lifted entirely, calling it all ridiculous.
Shifting now to the international scene, the same day National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant at the White House to talk about efforts for a ceasefire in the war in Gaza. Protesters gathering outside Israeli military headquarters in Tel Aviv. ABC's Matt Goodman is on the scene.
Hundreds of protesters converging here in Tel Aviv. They're meeting with a group of other protesters on the other side to show frustration with the pace of the hostage negotiations. There's an incredible amount of frustration here.
And just another quick reminder, we will be airing the presidential debate tomorrow night here on Super Talk. If you can't get near a TV, we've got you covered. The debate set to air at 8 o'clock right after the live radio event at Hot Springs in Murfreesboro. We hope you'll join us for that and hang around to watch the debate with a debate watch party. We're going to be partying in Murfreesboro. Hey, that's the latest news. We've got weather coming up. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
Welcome back as we wind down the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith. I meant to mention this to you guys. Join the conversation at @DCameronSmith. D as in David, Cameron Smith on X. X is a great platform for having those off-the-cuff exchanges. I'll be tweeting out stuff about the debate, and I love it when you guys decide to join in. That's at @DCameronSmith. And I post articles, different things like that, and I'd love your thoughts and feedback because I want to write to an audience that wants to hear it. I recognize the Tennessean on a lot of fronts has not been exactly known as a trusted conservative voice. I want to be that for you guys, and so I want the feedback, the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm looking at, I actually pulled up the Department of Justice's immigration-related prosecutions. 8 U.S.C. 1324 is this section, and it's just, I mean, frankly, it's not a lot. When we start looking at the different laws, and I believe that one's the harboring, like that's helping people evade the law, we have to prosecute. We have to say this, either this law is a law that we take seriously and we're going to uphold it, or we need to repeal it. We seem to really struggle with this idea that it's somehow bad to enforce the law. And for example, this is American Immigration Council's statistics from Department of Justice, but in 2019, there were 80,886 prosecutions for improper entry, which we talked about, and then illegal entry, there were 25,426. In 2020, we're talking fiscal year. In fiscal year 2020, that number of criminal prosecutions dropped from 80,886 to 27,630. That's the problem, is you've got to enforce the law. And, you know, folks say, well, that's harsh. That's the law. It's not harsh. The moment that you believe that we shouldn't enforce certain laws because there are a lot of people violating them is the moment that we have anarchy. And so the Trump administration, one of the things that it did well, it ramped up 2016, 45,000. This is for unlawful entry, DOJ prosecutions. In fiscal year 19, they were at the high water mark. That was the 80,886. And the Trump administration, when Trump was in office, ramped those up. 36,649 in 2017, 68,470 in 2018, up to 80,886, and then it just tanks, 27,630. I can tell you what your problem is. If you don't enforce the law and you have an incentive for people to be there, then they're going to come. And that's not, I don't think that's disparaging at all to any immigrants or anything like that. America's an awesome country. I love it here. I want to be here. I want other people to want to be here. I don't have a problem with that. But having a legal process to do that that's efficient and effective and fair and that responds to things we need as a country. There's absolutely nothing wrong saying we should have a system that looks at our economic needs and says, oh, that makes sense. We should allow these kind of worker visas. We should allow these type of immigrants to come in. We have a shortage of nurses, and we want more nurses to come in. Okay, cool. Fine. I think a lot of that makes sense. That's an orderly system of immigration. New Zealand, for instance, has like a points-based system that does just that. When I was working on the Hill, we looked at all these different potential systems that we could use that other modern countries are using to make sense out of their system of immigration. And we have chosen to not do any of that. And then when you don't prosecute, when you don't update the laws for a modern context, and you don't prosecute the laws that you do have, you end up with a terrible situation, which is what we have now. And it's shameful and it's embarrassing. And I don't mind blaming Joe Biden for Joe Biden's part in it, where he basically upended Trump's enforcement of immigration law. That's fair. We should criticize him for that. But the idea that there's not enough blame to go around is silly. Republicans have wanted the issue more than they wanted to solve it. Democrats do too. And this is why we end up suffering and people die. That's true. We shouldn't look past that. That there are people that are harmed by situations that should have been prevented if we were enforcing the law. When you see an immigrant who commits crimes be deported and come back in, and that happened over and over again, and then somebody dies, that is squarely on the shoulders of those not enforcing the law effectively. And that doesn't mean that we should be afraid. I do not. Again, I want to reiterate, don't be afraid. We just have to solve the problem. Even when we talk about the wall, the border wall. Well, if you look at the terrain, there's certain areas where a wall doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But drones might. The ability to catch these folks is still something that's paramount importance. And if somebody says, well, drones in this type of wall makes sense here, and a physical concrete wall makes sense here, and this metal wall makes sense here, okay, fine. I'm not going to argue the point, but let's do it. Let's just do it. Let's secure the border, and let's enforce the law. And if we don't like the way that it's turning out, and we're enforcing it against people that we don't have any interest in enforcing it against, change the law. And that, to me, is where we failed over and over again, is we have not been able to do anything useful except say that everything is wrong and broken. And I've seen the options. For example, the asylum stuff is easy to solve. There are legitimate claims for asylum. There are just jokes for asylum, where you just say the word asylum and then you're paroled. There's easy ways to handle this. We've got legislative text that could handle this. And instead of dealing with it, we want to make the issue. But we're going to talk about it. It's going to happen at the debate. Hop Springs and Murfreesboro. You can go with the gang from Super Talk and listen to the debate. And I think if Trump's wise, he's going to keep dragging Biden back to this issue, saying, why'd you undo my policies? Why didn't you just put them back when you realized they were good? I would just keep asking him those questions. Well, I've noticed these prosecutions have fallen off like a brick. Why aren't you criminally prosecuting for unlawful entry and unlawful reentry? Why aren't you doing it like that? And make him explain to his base, who gets mad when he enforces the law. But I would hold his feet to the fire. And if Trump can do that and not make it personal and just make it about Biden's ineffective leadership, he will win the debate. Matt's going to talk about that, I suspect, and bring that as he fills in on the drive for Brian. I want to know what you guys think. We're on short time here, 615-737-9986. 2205 says, just make the border a minefield. Well, that is an option. We can go, DMZ over in North Korea. That is an option. I think when kids start getting blown up, that's not going to go well. I don't think the American people want to see people killed. They just want to see the law enforced. 7672 says Trump's incapable of doing that. And he's talking about keeping Trump on task and focusing on the issue and drilling down and making Biden answer. I think you're probably right, but I know that his campaign staff is telling him right now, don't make this a fiery screed. Just make Biden explain why he's doing such a bad job, and you win. I think one of the things that's great about, how about a moat with some alligators? I don't know. Are there alligators in the Rio Grande? I mean, we do have the Gulf of Mexico sitting over there. I do know there's some gators in Louisiana. Let's see. 2837 says, Cameron, what are Republicans supposed to do when there's no compromise? They can't cede to all Democrats' demands. That is absolutely true. We can't. But the fact is, you have a split Congress. You have a split country. So the compromise that you're going to have to see is going to look like something that a lot of hardline Republicans are going to be like, okay, ugh, that's gross. But I mean, that's where like what Langford was starting out with. Everybody panned it. Everybody attacked him. but it's because they didn't want to compromise at all. That's the truth. James Langford is a good dude and a strong conservative, and he realized, I'm not going to get everything I want, but I can get a lot of the things that matter to the people who I represent. And it's just easier to say no. It's easier politically to say no and not come up with a game plan that can attract a majority in Congress than it is to just say no and to say, absolutely, we should just enforce the law we have. We should do it this way. And then we're left with what we got whenever we don't want to work with anybody else. Again, that's the truth. 2205 says, can't really use kids being hurt for your argument because that's already happening, if not worse. That's a very, very good point. Some kids are getting hurt. They're getting killed. They're not making it. They're getting hurt trying to cross the border. That is a great point. The moment that you put a landmine out there that a federal or state government puts out there and a kid gets blown up on that, it'll make the news right away. We got to take a break. Matt Murphy is here. He is in the house. He's looking rested, relaxed, and ready for the drive. When he comes back, we'll talk to Matt and then get him on his way. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on SuperTalk 99.7. Parting is such sweet sorrow. But my friend, Party in the Back, is here to make it all better. What's up, man?
You know, I would expect it from you.
You would.
That you would make fun of my Locks for Trump.
Your Locks for Trump.
Day 116 of Locks for Trump. By the way, I would note, for those of you watching on Super Talk Television, hello, everyone. I would note that, yes, I'm sporting Locks for Trump. I've committed to growing my hair out until we have a new president-elect of the United States of America. And notice, and it is not by coincidence, that since such time as I'm growing my hair out, Cameron is shaving his head. Mm-hmm. But he's growing a beard for Biden.
Beard for Biden. That's hurtful. It's quite hurtful.
Here's the thing, Cameron Smith.
Tell me how it is.
By the way. And I will be discussing this, and I was enjoying your conversation regarding immigration and the southern border. Much like, and I'm not faulting you for this, and I'm not saying that you've been infected with bureaucracy, although sometimes I wonder, bureaucrats overcomplicate things on purpose.
Yeah.
Just close down the border.
Agreed.
Declare a national emergency. Much like the Surgeon General declared a national emergency about gun violence, the President of the United States declares a national emergency and you shut down the border if you wanted to.
Yes.
But not enough people want to.
No. They want, again.
And who's in charge right now?
The Democrats.
Right.
They want the issue. They want to talk about it. They don't want to solve the problem.
But they didn't do it. They didn't do it during Trump either.
No.
Trump tried, but, you know.
Well,
you can only do so much if you're the president when you don't have the purse strings.
Bureaucrats are quite resilient, Matt. They don't give up easily. But have you seen that story about how Elon Musk shut down a server farm?
Sure.
He just finally went and cut the cable.
See you.
And I think
hey, by the way,
like that.
Before you go, I want to say this with you here. Anybody coming to Murfreesboro tomorrow night, you get to rub Cameron's head. There you go. Hot Springs.
See y'all.